So to put into context Carlos Monzon's life, we're going to take it back all the way to the beginning, to when he was born on August the 7th, 1942, born and named Carlos Roque Monzon. And he was born in a small town of San Javier in the northeast of Argentina, about 600 kilometres from the nation's capital, Buenos Aires. His family were of Macovi descent. Now, the Macovi are a native tribe of the Gran Chaco region of South America, which is located west of the Paraguay River and east of the Andes, and it's also shared between the Paraguayans, the Bolivians, and the Argentinians. So in 1950, when Carlos was 7 years old, his parents, named Roque Monzon and Amalia Ledzima, decided to leave town to try and find a better life in the larger city of Santa Fe in Barranquillas Oeste. Now, life was hard for Monzon, along with his family, which consisted of 12 siblings.
Crazy.
Now, there are actually conflicting reports, but on record, he was down as being the fifth born. And, of course, like all these tales tell you about small-town upbringings, they lived in a small house in a very poor neighbourhood.
Yeah, they did, and it was a difficult upbringing for the whole family, and it was during a difficult time in the 1950s because Argentina, their economy was in a terrible state, with the country's currency losing 70% of its value by 1951. Inflation did reach 50%, but it was a bit of a dire time, as well as the fact he lived in poverty with his siblings and of course with his mum and dad, and Carlos actually had to resort to stealing food at times when they couldn't get enough money to get some food on the table. And yeah, he would go and steal some food. He was, as I say, the fifth oldest. I'm sure his other brothers and sisters would have done the same thing, but there was actually one particular incident, one time where he actually stole a pot of hot food from a neighbour's window while she was actually cooking it. It sounds quite funny. He actually just sneaks in and takes it and runs away with his brother. But they're actually caught red-handed by the local policeman. And the punishment dished out by that policeman was to stick his hand in the boiling hot pot of food to teach him a lesson. So not only was it difficult coming up in such a really bad, dire neighbourhood in difficult times, you get doing something you shouldn't have been. You know, the police, they ain't going to mess about, and they will make an example of you, and burnt his hand quite bad, and clearly not the sort of thing we'd do today. Definitely difficult for Carlos.
Difficult neighbourhood, difficult life, difficult times, of course it was. And by the time Carlos reached the third grade, he was about 8 years of age at this point. He actually dropped out of school in an attempt to help his family. He started working various jobs. So he had jobs such as a shoe shiner, a paper boy when he was very young, before going on to deliver milk and gas tanks, and then working in a meat plant. And as he got older, of course, he got stronger and he became a bigger lad. He became a bit of what we would refer to in England as a brick shithouse. So when he was 16, in 1958, he met Zulema Encarnacion Torres, with whom he had his first son, Carlos Alberto Monzon. And during this time, he began boxing at the Minera Boxing Club, but was arrested several times for fighting in bars. This was something that you'll see was a pattern that was starting to emerge about Carlos Monzon very early on at this point in time. He liked to go out, he liked to have a drink, but he also liked to have a fight as well. And in his late teens, he was sent to prison for inciting a football riot in a stadium and for participating in another riot on a bus.
Jesus Christ. He definitely loved a fight, didn't he? I suppose that was, again, knocking about with these type of guys, and football being a big thing. And for the American fans, it's not American football, that is soccer. Obviously, he definitely loved the tear up, and he actually gained extra money for beginning to peddle prostitutes. Now, this is in his teens. I mean, probably late teens, sort of in between 16 and 17. He's getting involved in prostitutes, which is crazy. And so much so, he had to flee to Brazil for a while because the police were actually investigating him. So obviously leaving his siblings behind. Now, when he did return to Santa Fe in Argentina, it was roughly around 1959, 1960, about that time, and Monzon obviously came back alone. He didn't go back to live with his family, but he began living on a ranch with his friend Lalo and Lalo's sister. And they were basically just able to sort of hunt for food, because I think they hunted the snakes and then they would eat. That was their food. Their money, they didn't need so much money, but the main reason they needed a source of income was to to have a drink and to go to the bar, which is, that's across the world. I mean, we had it over here in sort of roughly around these times where, you go and work, or you work on a farm or a ranch, and then you need your money for your drinks. And that's what he did. And he also competed in some unofficial backstreet bouts to earn some extra beer money, basically, and get some money in his pocket. And that was his life going into his late teens.
Now, just at this point, I wanted to bring to the attention of a certain series that's out on Netflix at the moment called Monzon, a Knockout Blow. And it did inspire us to look at the case of Carlos Monzon. And in that particular series, you can actually see the dramatisation of how things went down. And his friend Lalo, in that particular series, actually ended up getting involved in a fight which he lost, and lost quite embarrassingly as well. And moving on from that incident, in a distressing turn of events, Lalo actually ended up committing suicide by shooting himself after losing that arranged bar fight. And how it all came about is that he was angered by a guy that had made advances towards his sister, so he arranged to fight him at the bar, only to end up getting knocked out. So once Lalo was laid to rest, Monzon was obviously still fuming with the guy that had beat Lalo up, so he decides to go out and seek his revenge. Now, while the guy was in the bar drinking, he walks up to him, and you can see this in the series. He walks up to him, goes behind him, smashes his head onto the bar multiple times, and absolutely sparks the guy the hell out before the bartender and the owner of the bar as well turns round, pulls his gun out and says, "Stop, otherwise I'm going to shoot you." To which point, Monzon obviously walks away. So this bar fighting continued. Now, there was a particular altercation where Monzon and his friend took on 5 guys in a fight, which got them both arrested, of course. Now, in a police interview the next morning, the policeman, who was called Belisa, was both impressed with his bravery, but also tired of arresting him every weekend for bar fighting. So he decides at this point, we need to channel this aggression into something productive. So he directed him to an acquaintance, Amilcar Brusa, who ran a boxing gym. Now, Belisa told Carlos Monzon that he must go or he will find himself back in his police cell, but for 6 months this time instead of just a night.